The yearly rainfall prediction and annual flood outlook released by the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency predict floods during the 2020 rainy season in 28 states. In response to this, the National Emergency Management Agency, that is the NEMA, has called on the state emergency management agencies to prepare to evacuate residents of communities that will be affected by the floods. We're now joined by environmental rights activist and director of programs, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, Jakpor Philip, to discuss flooding often caused by the rain and how to mitigate it. Jakpor, glad to have you join us.
It's a pleasure being on set. You guys are doing a very good job.
Thank you so much for that comment. All right. In 2012, Jakpor, the country witnessed over one of the worst flooding, in this country. 32 states were affected. 360 people lost their lives in that incident. 2 million people displaced. If we fast forward to this year, 2020, have things changed? Have we moved beyond that era?
Well, I think the first things first, it's good you cited that particular incident in 2012. I recall when that incident actually happened, I was in Lokoja, which was the epicenter of the flooding, and we were not prepared for it. But something has changed. What has changed? Yearly, we get these alerts by NIME, Hydrological Services Agencies. But unfortunately, again, it has become a yearly routine. I think these agencies of government are so happy. There's so much publicity about floods will happen. But we don't see the corresponding action, which is what is needed at this very moment to ensure that people do not suffer year in, year out when these floods occur. The floods in 2012 were very, very devastating. And since then till now, it has continued on that path. Of course, climate change is also there. But we have not done much in terms of preparing people. We have had evacuate. People should be evacuated. Even Lagos state government went as far as mentioning some areas, I think in Bejuleki, Ikorodu axis, mainland, that people should evacuate. But the question is, evacuate where?
You have just touched, this is a sore point. For me, you've just touched something that when I sit in my house and I'm listening to the news, either on radio or TV, and I hear people living in flood areas that are going to be flood-prone areas, please leave. And I ask myself,
where?
Leave to where?
Exactly.
How do you leave? With which money? Should the government, first of all, not putting the cart before the horse, provide a place where you can move people to, instead of telling people who are already, even where they're living is a pain, they're trying to get out, but they can't get out, you're telling them move, with which money? And you know how hard it is for accommodation here in Lagos,
So it's a major issue, and we have to throw something else into the mix. Now we are in the COVID-19 era, when you also say people should move, evacuate, you are also saying people should spread the coronavirus. But let us look at the bigger picture. We have to learn from other climes where you have these kind of disasters. And I always cite the hurricane season in the US and other countries. The hurricane season is usually between June and November, yearly. And every year there is preparation. There is preparation. Now the emergency response agencies have all it takes to get to the people, first of all, because you are going to have a lot of people caught up in remote areas. You have choppers, you have speedboats, you have a lot of things in place. You have shelters. And to shock you, even this year, a state like Florida in the US has planned for social distance shelters for those who are going to be displaced. But today, NEMA has warned, yes. But go to NEMA website, for instance. On NEMA website, you read that there's only one helicopter, which is stationed in Abuja. So if there's need for some rescue efforts in some remote areas, let us say in Bayelsa or in Rivers, how do you reach those people? So that's why I said we have concentrated so much on the
Alerts.
alerts. And the real thing which we should do, which is follow-up actions, is not there. Now, NEMA has raised the alarm and is asking for the state chapters to also prepare. How? I was in Lokoja, like I mentioned, where the floods in 2012 happened, to monitor what was happening. I think most of, even the national NEMA and the state chapter were busy trying to get media attention more than actually doing their work. You could not see synergies. And so in this dispensation, it is the same thing. Now, let us even look at a state like Lagos. We've seen some efforts at clearing the drains. I think that is good. But those are just like, it's like touching
a
not
pin
really
in a
touching
haystack.
the real challenges.
Want to come to
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Because you earlier on, you were mentioning something about the gridlock on the roads. Unfortunately, unfortunately, it's not fortunate. I drove through that same corridor, the Orile and Igomo axis. It was chaos. So when you are going to have these floods, you're also going to have a lot of roads blocked because of things that we could easily manage, but we are not managing them well. If we could not manage just diversion of traffic, how can we manage evacuation of people? And then you have also this kind of, go to the Urushoki axis, Lekki, there's a lot of reclamation going on, a lot of things that will further aggravate the crisis. So you can clear the drains, but then when you also block water channels and build on supposed green areas, you are going to create even more problems. So these are the areas I think we have to tackle if we want to mean well for our people.
I'm happy you mentioned the infrastructure aspect of it, because it's all well and good having alerts and letting people know, and even if there are plans in place for evacuation sites, there's still some type of work to be done in terms of preventing the severity of the spread of flooding when heavy rains do fall. So if we were to focus on infrastructure, for example, here in Lagos, it does seem as though when it does rain, it doesn't take long for these gutters to start overflowing into the streets. And for people who don't have the luxury of living on higher ground, they're obviously going to feel the full brunt of this downpour, of this flooding. So what do you think needs to be done in order to rectify that if we look at infrastructure alone?
Well, I think we have to look at everything together. First of all, there has to be public awareness. And I put it to you that Arise TV is doing even more awareness than NEMA and the state governments are doing. People have to know the dangers of living along floodplains. But in terms of infrastructure, we have to go back to where people live that they are not supposed to live, who gave them permits, and if the state government is asking people to leave those places and people are not living, or people build on areas that they are not supposed to, are there sanctions? So these are the kind of things we want to ask. So the issue goes back to government again. How serious is government in ensuring that we don't have these recurring incidents? People are built on green areas. The state government is also encroaching on areas that it should not. If you drive along the Urushoki end of Lagos, you see some massive, reclamation exercises going on there that we are not experts, but with just merely looking at it, these actions are going to create problems, because when you reclaim one part of the sea, you are also going to create problems in other parts of the sea. So these are the kind of problems that we must check if we want to be very, very serious. So first of all, public awareness, which is very, very good. This is what you are doing. We've heard NEMA say it will happen. I've not heard it on any radio station. I think they should even do such, if they are watching, some of these public awareness notices should be on the set, like your station. They should, so that people can hear and people can understand what is coming and then prepare. But beyond that, I think we all have to work collaboratively. NEMA, SEMA, that's the state chapters,
management agencies,
NIMET, Nigeria, all of them, they have to work together. So it's not the publicity about yearly holding press conferences and saying this is going to happen. What can we do? We want to start seeing them hold press conferences to tell us that they have gotten more speedboats, they have gotten choppers, things they have built shelters in high ground, and with what is happening today with the coronavirus, they've emulated, countries that are proactive in building social distance shelters, things like that. That's what we want to hear, not just this yearly
ritual.
Yeah.
Ritual of, okay, you talked about what can we do. So I'd ask you this. Yes, I know that flood can be really devastating and very hard to contain, very devastating and very hard to contain. For example, I was watching a news program on TV, and I learned that in Italy, and this is horrible, in Italy, rain that's supposed to fall for a year fell 2 days. Now that is massive. I can't even begin to think. When I saw the pictures, it was, I can't even begin to think about it happening in Africa or in Nigeria. You know, that's what short-term and long-term plans should governments, both at the federal and state, be making, because you talked about what to do, to curb floods. We're talking about being proactive. It's not waiting until the season of rain begins to do something. We're talking about being proactive.
Yeah. Well, let me escalate this a bit. Now we anticipate we are going to have above normal rains. So the floods will not even come only from blocked drains. The floods will come from, for instance, dams that are threatened, and then they need to release water. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what happened in 2012 when the floods overtook about 21 or so states. I saw it, I witnessed it. It was really devastating. What happened? Now, Lagdo Dam in Cameroon was being threatened because there was unusually heavy rains. So what is happening in Cameroon and elsewhere might actually even come here. The Lagdo Dam was being threatened and there was need to release waters. And Nigeria is on the downside when you are looking at the topography. So the waters will always find its level. In 1979, when that dam was built, I think what we learned was that Nigeria was also supposed to build what they call buffer dams, which will assimilate some of the waters that will come from that way when waters are released, when there's the threat that is going to be breached. But we didn't do any of those things, and I don't think we even have any of such plans. So that is the bigger picture. But then, at the local level, we have to start doing things the right way. It's not so, the flooding we are talking about is not just so much of the drains that are, blocked here and there. There are major things that we should do that we are not doing, or things we should not do that we are doing. It goes beyond the citizenry. Once you have laws, you have to enforce the laws. When government itself breaks the laws that it makes, then there's a problem. We have to stop giving people permits to build in green areas, floodplains. We have to be serious about evacuation, and the seriousness about evacuation is not just moving people. Provide temporary shelters for them so that they are not left alone to take decisions. And then the publicity about this whole thing. People must know about climate change. People must know about climate change. People must know the roles they can play or not play in the whole gamut. So these are some of the things that we can do in the short and long term. And then once we do that, I'm sure we will be seen as serious people.
As serious people, we just hope and believe that we'll begin to do that. We'll get back to you. We'll just take a break. Hang in there. We'll be back.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We are still joined by Jakpor Phillips, who is here to discuss flooding, often caused by rain, and how we can mitigate it. I wanted to ask you, Jakpor, one thing we know is for certain is that Nigeria will continue to have its rainy seasons, and even though we can have expectations and estimations over how long it'll last, how heavy the rain will fall, ultimately we can prepare for the fact that rainy season is going to come. But it seems as though with that knowledge and with the preparation of knowing that these rains are coming, it doesn't seem as though everybody has the means to adequately prepare themselves. In that case, who do you think the responsibility falls onto? I know earlier you were talking about people being responsible for their own actions and knowing that perhaps you shouldn't set up shop or set up a life where you could be at risk should rain fall. But when it comes to people having the means to adequately prepare themselves and protect themselves from heavy rains, whose responsibility do you think that is?
Well, I think government has a lot of role to play in that regard. Now, one thing we must also note beyond just what Nimet or NEMA said recently, this is not new. The warning actually started in January. So I think NEMA and the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agencies are only re-echoing what has been mentioned in January. So the preparations should actually start immediately. That is what we have not seen, like I mentioned earlier. We didn't learn our lesson from 2012 and subsequently. For those who were at the epicenter of the floods in 2012, I was in Lokoja. At a point, I was also in Port Harcourt. And it was very, very unusual. We were not prepared. But we've moved beyond that. Now we have the warnings. Now we should have government really doing something very, very concrete. In terms of preparation, a lot of people are victims of this situation. Some people built on those places without knowing that some of those places are floodplains. So when you say they should move, it becomes a problem. So it is the responsibility of government to make laws and then enforce the laws and be seen to be enforcing the laws it has made. But that is not happening. So it's almost like a situation of to your tent, to Israel. Everybody will have to fend for themselves. But that is not how it should be.
Yeah.
There should be we should see government as being responsible. Just like the issue of the roads we mentioned earlier. By the time you see the chaos, I drove through the Mori axis this morning. By the time you see the chaos there,
bedlam.
You feel righteous anger because you are like...
That's the phrase.
Yeah, you feel righteous anger, and you are right. Because you ask yourself, is there government here? If there's government, why is this happening? So if you have also seen the floods, and you, like I said, there's so much publicity about, there's going to be flood. And then you also see some people who want to also make money from the situation, But government has to step in and be very, very serious about this at all levels. NEMA has to move beyond talking and walking the talk. They have to...
Yeah, not just talking the talk.
Yeah, not talking the talk. Yeah. Draw the states into the work together, work with stakeholders, do a lot of education. Like I said earlier, let's see NEMA or their state chapters come to Arise TV. Let them do this publicity. Let them pay for it. Let people see these things. Because since I've been hearing about the floods, I've only read it. I've not seen any.
Pictures.
I've not seen pictures.
And pictures speak louder than words.
We've not heard it on radio. We have not seen it on television. It's not there.
Jakpor, at times one wonders, is it a question of, because what there's a will, there's a way. And while you have a thinking to serve, ideas will come.
Exactly.
So one really wonders, is it lack of the think? Is it a behavioral thing that those who are giving this powers cannot sit down and fashion out ways to cushion the effects of these natural factors on the people? But let me ask you this. The Minister of Water Resources, Suleiman Adamu, has commended the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, that is NISA, for the development of what is called a flood mobile app. In what ways will this app add value to the management of the flood, if you're aware of that mobile app?
I think we are tired of all these publicity stunts. We want to see the average man out there, the people living in the flood areas that will likely be flooded. Do they know all these things? Let us go beyond the app. Let us forget the techie. Can we just do things that people can see and feel? I've mentioned, let us see helicopters that can evacuate people. Let us see, I think most importantly, let us see, shelters built in high ground where people can evacuate to. Let us see
2012 to 2020 is about 8 years.
Exactly.
You said it's only one helicopter.
It's stationed in Abuja.
Yes.
Is it a question of funds, or that the funds are not being managed, or is it a question of the fact that leaders are not watching what their counterparts in other climes are doing, to help these situations?
It is unfortunate. I think it has taken COVID-19 for some state governments to start putting some things in place in the hospitals that they have. Because before then, they will easily fly out and then they forget about the rest of us. It has taken COVID-19. I pray we don't have a disaster that will make us wake up. We don't need it.
Amen.
Even the roads we were talking about earlier, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Anybody knows that, for instance, in Lagos, if there's blockade in Mile 2, there's blockade in Ojota, maybe Oshodi, the whole of Lagos will be
affected, yeah.
So why do we have to wait for disasters to happen before we take the... You don't need... I'm not an expert in building things or engineering or whatever, but we all know common sense that, look, there's no way this will not affect all of us. Even if I don't live in Lekki, I know somebody who lives in Lekki, I know somebody who lives in Oronshoki. If it affects one, it affects all somehow. So I don't simply know why these guys cannot wake up and do something, because we are lucky at this time. Like I said, look at the Florida. I always cite Florida because Florida is like the epicenter of, the hurricane, always in the US.
Yeah.
They are prepared. It's a yearly thing. There's a budget for it. Every year there's innovation. They use drones to check where people are stranded. They have choppers, they move. Everything is there. So they plan. But we fail to plan, and we
plan to fail.
Exactly.
You fail to plan, you automatically plan to fail.
But we do the publicity. Hey, there's going to be floods. What is that? So what have you done to ensure that
that's just talk. Anybody
lives
can
are
do
not
that.
lost? Exactly. It's going to affect agriculture because it's going to affect the planting season and harvesting season. I think the planting season starts around April, runs through to September or so. But we're going to have rains that will extend into October, November. So how is it going to affect agriculture? So these are whole, it's a whole thing. It's at all levels, federal, state, local governments. It's about seriousness, not just talking, which will walk the talk.
Oh, lovely. Well, Jakpor, Philip, thank you very much for that conversation there. Thank you so much for your time.